Good morning. So Ruben Delgado, the Assistant Chief of Police here today, so thanks for coming. Just a little over a year ago, about a year and a half ago, we put together a group of detectives to kind of focus on our unsolved major crimes. And so we're constantly looking for new technologies, new investigative ways to kind of revisit these older cases and try to bring some closure to the victims of some of these heinous crimes that have happened in the city. And then with our partnerships with the gentlemen that are behind me, FDLE, we were able to have a successful conclusion in this case that I'm about to talk about. So about 14 years ago, in 2007, the victim in this case was walking home, got befriended by the suspect in this case, the defendant now, Jared Vaughn. He befriended her, walked her home, and then ultimately sexually battered her in her room and then fled. At that time, we gathered some evidence at the time. However, we ran into a few dead ends in the case back in 2007. In March of this year, or March of 2020 rather, we started re-examining the case, trying to look for different ways to kind of re-energize the case, try to develop some new leads. We contacted our partners here at FDLE. They assisted us with the research in this case on the DNA side, where we ultimately had some possible leads developed from that case. So we traveled up to Virginia on a suspect that we suspected in this case. We were able to get a search warrant for DNA, where he was ultimately, we got this DNA from him, submitted it back to FDLE, where it came back as a match, 1 in 700 billion chances that he was the guy in our case. So again, we took the leads from what we got off the DNA. The detectives worked the case just like it was a brand new case, and we're able to develop the suspect in this case. So he surrendered himself to Orient Road Jail on June 16th and charged with sexual battery. So it was taking 14 years for resolution in this case, but it's something that was important for us, something important for the victim, that we put some closure to this case. And that was the whole idea about this squad, was to kind of take these cases that have been unsolved, kind of re-energize them, right? Get with FDLE, see what we can do on the technology side, and in this case, it was a positive arrest, and the victim now can have some closure in her life. So I know there's a fact sheet that Eddie gave you all, or Jamel gave you all in reference to some of the stuff, and at this time, I'd like to introduce Mark Brunel, who's the special agent in charge for FDLE, and the head of the lab, Justin. So.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning. My name is Mark Brunel. I'm the special agent in charge for FDLE Tampa. I'd like to first thank the Tampa Police Department for their continued partnerships and the many initiatives that we work together on. Today's announcement is another example of teamwork and tenacity. Genetic genealogy provides leads to investigators based on DNA matches to relatives found in public genealogy databases. Florida's team includes experts in genetic genealogy, analytical research, forensics, and investigations who work with our local agencies. FDLE partners with Parabon Nanolabs, who conducts the testing and often the initial genetic genealogy work. Our success depends on information found in public genealogy databases, where participants must, and this is important, they must opt in for law enforcement matching. FDLE began offering genetic genealogy in 2018 for unsolved violent crimes. Genetic genealogy is only used in cases where all the leads have been exhausted. The use of genetic genealogy helps make Florida safer by providing leads that result in the arrest of suspects in cold case homicides and sexual assaults, taking these individuals out of our Florida neighborhoods and communities. Thank you. Any questions? With that, we'll take some questions in regards to the case, if you have any. So it all starts off with the original crime scene evidence, which TPD had, and they've had, like I said earlier, exhausted all their leads. They come to us, and then we submit this to the Parabon Nanolabs, who then does a SNP sample of that. They then provide us the results. We use those results to search publicly accessible databases where people put their DNA into for genetic research. But the most important part is these databases, the end user, or the customer per se, they have to opt in. They have to choose to allow law enforcement to go into those databases. If you choose not to, we can't see it. If you choose to, then we can see it. And the bottom line on this is basically an investigative lead with a little bit of science to it. It's nothing more than a Crime Stoppers tip. We get a bunch of leads back, and then it goes back to TPD, who did amazing work, as always, with old school police work, interviews, surveillance, analytical research, building different trees to see who's a possible suspect. It's not a one-stop shop. It comes back to hard police work, old-fashioned beat work. And based on that, they got a new search warrant to go to the suspect, take his DNA, bring it back to us, which we have the original crime scene DNA, and it was a match. This is the second one. This is the 7th one we've done as a state, but TPD's second one.
So from what you were explaining, so these suspects submitted to this the database and he accepted to the police to get his DNA.
Now, the suspect did not. The TPD detectives got a search warrant for his DNA to compare the sample, and that was the match, which was 1 in 700 billion, I believe the chief said. Good?
How many cases do you have? How many cases do you have open like this, similar to this, where this kind of technology?
The exact number, I don't have too many, to be honest with you. Those are, we look at all of them. We don't look at any case as a cold case, right? We look at them all as unsolved, and that's why we've kind of formed these group of detectives together, so we could really give it the attention it needs to try to put some closure to all these cases.
How long ago was the other case that was solved with this technology? Can you give us any detail about what that case was about?
I don't have that.
This is kind of weird. So how do you see the future with this technology? Do you feel that there's a lot of cold cases that can be solved since police?
There could be, but again, this is the last resort. Every other investigative lead has to be exhausted before we do this type of process.
How important is it for these victims for you guys to use this technology and try to come to a conclusion for them? How important is it and how does it impact them?
Well, I think it's very important. I think it gives those victims closure. It gives the detectives the ability to close cases out. I mean, this is 14 years old. If it wasn't for this technology, I'm not sure we'd be here today. Again, it's one more tool in the toolbox for these detectives to use. Good?
Good. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.